Okay, so thank you guys for coming to the Avoiding Burnout workshop. I'm actually excited that it got rescheduled for this time because there's a lot going on right now with finals approaching. I know family time can be stressful for some people, just the end of the semester in general. So I'm really glad that we have Elizabeth Saunders with the Counseling Center here to share some tips for avoiding burnout and some coping mechanisms. I'll ask you guys to share your name and then your major, and we'll just kind of introduce ourselves real quick. Can we start with Kaylee? Let's start with Myra.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, so my name is Myra. My major is biology with the pre-med emphasis.
Cool. Thank you, Myra. Samantha?
Hi, everyone. My name is Samantha, and I'm a social work student.
Very cool. Sloan?
Hi, I'm Sloan and I'm a finance major.
Very cool. Jalen?
Hi, I'm Jalen and I'm a nursing student.
Nice. Haley?
Hi, my name's Haley. I'm a multimedia journalism major with minors in sociology and women's studies.
Very cool. And then Kaylee?
Hi, I'm Kaylee. I'm majoring in business management and I should be graduating here in the spring.
Very cool. Elizabeth, I'll give it to you.
Thank you. Wow, you guys represent a really diverse subject matter. I'm really excited to talk to all of you. I have a little PowerPoint that I can go through. So let me just pop it up on the screen, just gives us something to look at while we talk to each other. And I am gonna find it. Let's see. Let me do this. And then if someone, okay, sometimes when I make it full slideshow view, people can't see it. Would someone mind unmuting and just say, hey, I can see it, or hey, I can't? Or Ryan, you're still here. Can you see it?
Yeah, it looks good.
Oh, perfect. Okay. So I will then introduce myself. My name is Elizabeth Saunders. I have a bachelor's degree from many years ago in speech communication, and then took some time off, and I have a master's degree in social work that I earned from the University of Alaska in Anchorage. And I graduated with that degree in 2012, worked toward licensure for whoever the student is who's in the social work program. To become a licensed therapist, you either have to have your master's in psychology or social work, and then you work for a few years under supervision of someone more senior, and then you're able to register with your state after taking an exam to become a licensed therapist. So I've been here at the Wolfpack Wellness Counseling Center since fall of 2021, so last August. And I love it over here. You all as students here on this campus are so lucky to have this resource. All the time I talk about how the access that our student population gets to counseling services is sometimes better than what the general population is getting in the community. So I share that, and I strongly encourage people to utilize a lot of our services here. So I can share more about what some of those are at the end. Okay, let's see. Is there anything more I want to introduce about myself? I don't think so. So today I've been asked to share a little bit about burnout and what a time of the semester to sort of talk about this experience or this feeling. I'm sort of going to touch on 3 different progressions of how we feel stress in our body. And so stress is sort of the common word we all use when we start to notice things aren't going quite right. That can turn into burnout when it's extended. And sometimes that can turn into things that then we talk about with students at the counseling center, things like anxiety and depression. And we can just have flare-ups of some really chronic stress experiences. So let's just kind of clarify what would be useful for everyone to take away from today. it seems it would be helpful for us to sort of know what we're looking out for. So what are the signs and symptoms of any sort of mental distress? And then how is stress linked to burnout, and what differentiates that? How do we prevent some of these feelings as best we can, or some of these physical experiences? And then once we already are kind of in that land of feeling stressed and overwhelmed and on the way to burnout, what are some of the coping skills we can use? And then how do we know if we need to bring in someone else? Because sometimes we can't manage it on our own, and that is totally okay. I will also say too, I sometimes will give different talks around campus, and I did a few of these presentations last year. There may be some things that feel repetitive or really familiar. So I have empathy for that if you're like, oh, I already know all of this. But at the same time, I will say, I have been, as I said, a therapist for over a decade. And sometimes I still need to be reminded of these things. You know, I'll go through a week sometimes of asking people like, hey, are you drinking enough water? And then realize by that night that I have had no water and 3 cups of coffee. So I think it's good for all of us always to just maybe have a little reminder of it's okay to stop and focus on the basics and do a quick check-in. So to start this conversation, let's just start with the common term of stress, which we all use, and it's a term that gets thrown around a lot. This feeling of being overwhelmed or unable to cope with a mental or emotional experience. One way I like to differentiate this is a temporariness. So kind of 2 parts of that. The first part is that usually it's pretty easy to figure out what is causing that stress. So usually it's something really specific, like there's a deadline coming up, or I have this really specific conflict happen with a family member on Thanksgiving and I'm dreading seeing them at Christmas. Or so it's very specific and usually linked to an event. And then generally once that situation is resolved, our symptoms go away. The other part of this is that stress, and again, whoever is biology major and pre-med, maybe you know about this a little bit more, but just sort of how we experience things in our body. And so our endocrine system is what manages sort of the neurochemicals that cause us to feel different experiences in our brain and our body. And so sometimes we might experience a flood of adrenaline, and it might be because a stranger is trying to break into our car. Sometimes we might experience a flood of adrenaline, and it's because we're super excited because we have a date that night with someone new and super cute. So I think it's important to kind of differentiate that sort of stress in a neutral way is not always bad. And so as part of my standard, I always just sort of review the stress curve. Some of you may have seen this before, but I think when we don't have any of that physiologic reaction to any stimulus, that's also a reason for concern, right? That's times when we're feeling really lethargic and inactive and not super motivated to finish anything. It's in this second category of really optimum stress. So enough to sort of like get us off the couch, get us out of bed, get us to the job we hate, but it's because we're earning money to buy all the people we love Christmas gifts, right? So that's sort of where we want to operate. The rest of our talk today is going to be when it passes that threshold. So when we're feeling that physiologic experience of like, instead of butterflies in our tummy, it's a feeling like I want to throw up. Or instead of just like a little extra energy in my body, it's like a panic or an anxiety. And then it even past that, it's when I'm feeling like I've ridden this stress curve and out the other side, I just literally have nothing left to give. We want to prevent that from happening as well. And so we can see burnout on the tail end side of this stress curve. Also, I can't see everyone's, I don't know if anyone wants to say anything, feel free at any point to just unmute and try to like talk loudly to interrupt me. I'll try to invite questions too, if anyone wants. So even before the pandemic, there were lots of schools, college campuses, and research groups trying to identify changes in the student experience. And there was, I think in one study I read, and I didn't include it on this, which I should have, but even in just the past 3 years, I think whatever organization it was, did a survey of college students and found that 30% of students were reporting feelings of stress and burnout. And then the 3-year period between, it was like 2019 to current, there had been a 41-point jump in students experiencing stress. And so maybe it actually was the first part of this article that said recent reports of 72% of college students experience stress about the future of their education. Especially during pandemic times, a huge majority of students were reporting stress about falling behind or failing. So these are really common stresses for students. It's one of the largest investments you're going to make next to a house and a car, right? So you're investing tons of money. A lot of us have family pressure to excel in a certain way. So maybe we're the first generation of people who have gone to college, and our family wants to make really sure that we know that, like, well, don't waste this opportunity, or you don't want to be like the other people in your family who couldn't do this, right? And so the amount of pressure that we can get from trying to be successful in the college environment is a lot. And I even, so I mentor a lot of specifically masters in social work students who are going into the field, and telling them, you know, in my 10 years post-masters, nothing in the real world has felt even as stressful as the college experience. I mean, we all, depending on where we are in the process, have so many eyes on us all the time, right? So we're getting tons of criticism, and yeah, it's good criticism and feedback from assignments and tests, or we may be doing an internship and we're getting maybe criticism and feedback for that. We might be working in the community or doing a work study on campus at the same time. And we have sort of like this microscopic view on everything we're doing, which really skews, you know, just this feeling of satisfaction and accomplishment. It just feels like we're really under a microscope. So lots of reasons that in this particular environment, the factors can come together to really predispose us to stress, burnout, and then even more chronic mental health concerns. Okay, so I made a little video just because I didn't make it, included a video, just because I get sick of hearing my voice talk for quite so long. So I'm just gonna share this little video. Oops. And so have patience as I stop sharing and then reshare this little YouTube. Which is gonna take me a few minutes. I am sharing my screen. There is a video on, oh, but you know what I bet happened. I'm gonna make sure y'all can hear it by enabling sound. So give me just 2 seconds. Do you know what's funny? This is just a little side babble while I figure out what I'm doing. I did one of these last semester for students on imposter syndrome, and then I like massively failed at utilizing Zoom and my share screen. And so I like to use it as an example for us to, if you're having perfectionist thoughts, you can be like, well, at least I'm not as inept as Elizabeth, right? So let me see here. I'm just gonna play for 1 second.
Or like you couldn't bring yourself to care about anything? If you're like me, then you've probably felt this way before, but was unsure as to why. So boss, today I'm gonna share with you my personal experience overcoming burnout in college and how you can use my strategies to ensure you maintain proper physical and mental health in your own academic journey. Now here's my story. It was a Friday night in March, and I had survived another grueling week of intense studying and exams in my master's in accounting program. Whereas I was usually full of energy on a Friday night, I found myself rather lethargic, not having much of an appetite, which for me was pretty unusual. As most Fridays in university went, my phone was exploding with messages to come and party, and not wanting to be the odd man out, I got myself together and met up with my friends. As I was at the bar, I started to feel even more tired and told my friends I had to sit down. My friends returned to the dance floor, and as they returned to check up on me, they found me passed out on the floor. I woke up the next morning, but instead of being in my bed, I was in the hospital with one of my friends by my side. He filled me in on what had happened, and the only thing I could think of was that I had to get home to study. As the doctor came into the room, she explained to me that my body was overworked and that I needed to take better care of myself to avoid this happening again. My prognosis was simple: burnout. As I laid there in the hospital bed, I knew I never wanted to go through that horrific experience again, but I didn't know how to change my lifestyle to avoid burning out. I felt like I always had so much to do and that I couldn't afford to take anything out of my busy schedule. But if I didn't, I was destined to end up back in the hospital, or worse. I spent the next week at home recovering from this traumatic event when my friend Justin came to visit. Justin was a great student and an awesome friend, and he always amazed me as to how he could manage juggling so many of his life's responsibilities like school, work, and exercise. I then asked Justin, "Your life is so much more busy than mine. How do you avoid burning out?" What he told me changed the course of my academic career and health forever. Justin began to explain that building good study habits is one of the ways he avoids burning out. He explained that there are two types of students, the effective and non-effective studiers. The effective studiers allocate a couple hours to their notes and focus without distractions. The non-effective studiers set no time restrictions on their review, but allow themselves to work with Facebook open, music playing, and their phone by their side. Sadly, the second scenario resonated with me. Justin said that he used the time he saved to relax, go out with friends, and be social, all while obtaining some of the top marks in our program. This tip alone blew my mind, so I pleaded to Justin to share some more of his secrets. Justin went on to explain that he used to constantly double book his commitments, causing him to stress out, which I knew that I too found myself guilty of doing. He then pulled out his iPhone and showed me that he now tracks all of his classes, work shifts, and social outings on his Google Calendar. Hearing this suggestion, I began to kick myself as I was wasting time on useless apps like Facebook and Instagram when I should have been using apps to organize my schedule and ultimately help myself avoid burnout that I fell victim to. Seeing his busy schedule on his Google Calendar, I had to ask, "Do you ever sleep?" He laughed and told me that sleep is critical to his academic success and avoiding burnout. Justin highlighted how so many students in college like to brag about how many all-nighters they pull each semester, but in his research, sleep was not to be neglected. Not surprisingly, he cited one study that showed that students, like Justin, who obtain the best marks sleep 8 or more hours per night. Admittedly, getting more sleep made sense, but if you're like me, then wanting to get more sleep and actually getting more sleep can be challenging. So I inquired how Justin ensured he regularly got 8+ hours of sleep. He responded with one word: no. I was confused at first, but then Justin explained to me that saying no is the key to protecting the time he needs to study, exercise, and sleep. In college, it can be easy to get wrapped up in all the parties and extracurricular events. However, these events can easily begin to detract from your ability to focus on the activities that are the most important, the academic success and health. Justin explained that whenever he is asked to take part in any activity that interferes with his pre-planned study, exercise, or sleep commitments in his calendar, then he automatically turns him down in order to preserve the time he needs to maintain his health and mental well-being. Right at this point of his explanation, Justin's phone sounded and he was off to the gym. Fast forward 2 months and I was back in exam time, the same period that a few months prior had sent me to the hospital. Luckily, this time I was prepared. I had all my study periods blocked off in my calendar, I studied without distractions, and ensured that I slept as much as I could. That exam period, I wrote 4 challenging exams, and to my delight, I scored in the top 10% of my class. But better yet, I had 0 trips to the hospital, which I can thank my friend Justin for. Thanks for watching. If you want to learn more skills to become a boss and live the life you deserve.
Okay, so obviously, like, this is a little bit idealistic. I feel like that's the first thing that if someone had showed me this, like, you know, in the middle of finals week during any time of life that I've been in school, I would have been like, oh gosh, that sounds amazing. I didn't think of this, right? I mean, it seems very sort of like, of course we would all do these things if we had the time. So I want to speak to that. I just want you all to know that I'm not sort of selling this thing as like, it's as easy as this video shows. I know there are lots more complex things that go into managing our schedules than just sort of saying like, use your iPhone calendar to manage it. But I really do feel like the framework of that can certainly be tweaked and modified. And these are a lot of tips that I try to at least check into in my regular life when I feel some of these things happening. So we can talk through all of that. So we'll just kind of break down sort of the trajectory as that film talked about the buildup of burnout symptoms and then sort of how to fight that happening. I think of burnout as it's the opposite of thriving. So it happens when people experience chronic stress, leaving them exhausted and drained. And this term is generally used in an occupational stress definition, which when you're a student, that sort of is one of your occupations during that time. So we're using that interchangeably. And so far, I think we've identified that when you're feeling exhausted, anything related to school just does not give you that burst of enthusiasm or excitement or motivation to accomplish. The grades start to slip a little bit. You're studying, maybe the first couple of weeks of class, you're setting aside huge chunks of time to study, and then it becomes less and less, and then it becomes the hour before the test, right, by the end. You notice feelings of irritability and anger bleeding into your relationships with roommates or family or romantic partners, increased feelings of thinking about the worst case scenario, anticipating failure, anticipating all that can go wrong, and then even feeling it in our bodies. So maybe sort of like a tinglingness in our hands, or spotty vision, or more headaches, or just feeling tense and tight all over. So these are, again, as outlined in the film, it seems like very foundational routines and habits. I don't think we need to be perfectionist about all of these things. So again, for me, if I have a particularly stressful week or month and I realize that I'm starting to feel burnt out, I'm not going to say, okay, I need to overhaul the whole thing and integrate all of these things into my life. But I think it's this sense of like, how can I integrate even just one of these things? Or how can I take the smallest amount of time to modify and still get accomplished what I need to? And so these are things like a wellness routine, like moving your body, drinking some water, making sure you're, I'm going to say at the least eating 2 meals a day, at least like a breakfast and a dinner type meal, getting some sort of sleep. I want to talk about the time management routines that I think some of us too, we sort of find ourselves like dreading the work period, but the part from the film that can be helpful is actually scheduling in fun and leisure. So I think we get resentful when we're spending so much time studying and think it can't be possible to even go out with our friends, and then that'll sort of build, and then we'll get so resentful of the time that then we'll go on like a weekend long bender. And by bender, I don't necessarily mean like, drinking and partying, but I think then it just builds up so much that we completely disengage and then super fall off track and try to cram in all the fun we've been missing out on. And so time blocking for that can be really helpful. This idea of just partnering with our bodies, I think in our society and our culture, and especially in the academic world, we hang out a lot in our brain. We're thinking, we're studying, we're reading. There's a lot of learning happening. We kind of forget that our brain is part of a physical body and lose track of the patterns that we might be feeling an emotional or mental health experience. And it's disconnected from what else is going on in the rest of our body. So being aware of like, oh, do I notice how my breathing changes when I'm stressed versus relaxed? Do I notice how my heart rate changes when I'm about to fall asleep versus when I'm awake first thing? Am I getting sweaty or twitchy or agitated at different times of the day? I think we also too have this ability, there's sort of our first thought and then a second thought. And a lot of us will have the first thought, which is the emotion like, oh man, I'm feeling really anxious about this test. Then the second thought is a really quick judgment usually, which is like, well, I wouldn't be feeling so anxious. Usually sounds like our mom or bossy people in our lives. The second feeling is like, well, I wouldn't be feeling so anxious if I had studied, or, oh, if only I like was smarter, or I bet this other person is doing it a different way than me. So what I always encourage people to do is to let that emotion happen and prevent that second judgment thought from happening. Because then we're just dealing with two things. We're dealing with the initial feeling of feeling stressed and anxious and worried, and we're dealing with like shame and guilt that we've brought on for thinking we should be doing or feeling a different way. And then again, the other thing that the film brought up, which is being able to say no. And I just, again, want to put out there, it sounds so simple, right? Like just say no to these. But I know creating healthy boundaries is one of the topics that I spend the most amount of time talking to people with in the counseling center. It can be easy from someone on the outside to say, like, just tell your family you can't drive home this weekend, or just tell your neighbor she can't bring the kids by this weekend or something, right? So on paper, saying no sounds like it should be really easy, but believe me, I know how challenging it can be. So again, I kind of encourage, like, not an all or nothing, but integrating maybe just tiny little baby steps. So maybe I'm not ready to tell my parents I won't drive home on the weekend or come to family dinner on Friday. But what I can say no to is staying for 4 hours and instead leaving for after 3, right? Okay. Does anyone have any questions or thoughts at this moment? Just want to make sure I'm not rambling through. Okay, so this is, we can do like a little participation here at the end as well. So where I go to next is, how do we differentiate sort of the level of stress where it just takes me having a conversation with myself or you having a conversation with yourselves, like, oh, things have gotten a little off kilter. I think I can rein it back in. If I just tweak a few things, and I'll be back on track within 24, 48 hours or a week, right? So the times when it still feels more in our control might be if the symptoms have lasted for less than 2 weeks. Again, they're really connected. It's easy to identify what is causing this stress. So maybe it's feeling a little down or overwhelmed, but you're still able to get to work. You're still completing your schoolwork. You're keeping your living space clean. Might be a little hard to fall asleep, but once you do, you're able to stay asleep for 6 or 8 hours, right? If you're still in this window, these are the things that can be helpful to integrate back into life. So moving your body. Just in this aerobics yoga part, I'll mention I'm trained as a yoga instructor, and my training teacher just shared this awesome thing. She used to teach roll on the floor yoga, which I thought was awesome. And I realized I was also doing some version of that, which is like, some days I'll just lay on the floor. And she was like, you can count that. That's yoga. So again, when I say like temper your expectations, a lot of us think like, I don't have time for an hour yoga class. Probably not, and especially during finals, but we all have 5 minutes of the day to just kind of lay on the floor and like roll side to side, or bend our knees up to our chest, or just stretch our arms out flat on the ground, you know? So again, checking our own expectations, that it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be any certain length of time, but just rolling around on the floor yoga for 5 minutes can make a difference. Some sort of social contact. So a big red flag is when we're isolating. So if I just like shoot a text to a couple people I haven't talked to in a while, totally counts. Trying to integrate as much of a regular sleep schedule as we can. Food nourishes our brain, obviously. And so making sure we're getting some fuel in our machine. And whatever we do in this realm of spirituality, so whether it's meditation, prayer, mindfulness, walking in nature, these things do incredible things for our nervous system. Oh, I think I just maybe talked a little bit more about the specifics of these. What I would say is, how about in the chat of just sort of these baseline things, if anyone wants to share sort of your first go-to, like maybe what your easiest of these is when you start to feel off track. So if anyone is like, oh, I start to know when I'm off, when I stop moving my body. So exercise for me. For others, it might be like, oh, I realize I start skipping breakfast and lunch. So for me, it's the food part. For other people, it's like their spiritual practice. They say, oh, I stopped taking hikes or going to the place that I worship. Does anyone want to share? Maybe these are too personal or private. I don't know.
I'll share.
Yeah.
I know I'm feeling burnt out when I go home from work and I don't want to do the dishes after I eat dinner.
Yeah. So yours might be the tweak that you do for you might be just a little tightening up of like a routine or even an incentive too. So like, I think again, it's knowing your incentives. Sometimes it can be like, well, if I clean up my kitchen, maybe I'll treat myself to ordering out tonight or something, right? Or it'll feel so good to cook this dish and I need this pan to do it, so I might as well clean it up, right? So we're still in the realm of like noticing something is off, but still being able to fix and modify. I was just gonna see what anyone else shared. Oh yeah, exactly. Like our bodies, when we're in that stress response, are craving more quick carbohydrates, right? So we notice our, to kind of accommodate for that fight or flight response, we start eating a lot more sugars and foods because that fuel is easier to process. And our body thinks we need it because it thinks we need to prepare to fight a tiger, right? Even though we don't. And yeah, like using our less helpful coping strategies. So sort of zoning out on our phones or playing more video games or like binge watching a whole show, being able to stop doing that, like getting that kind of quick feel good sensation in our brain rather than the overtime feeling. Yeah, these are great. The irritability, certainly. And even better when we're in trustworthy relationships. Sometimes we can fall into the irritability of a stress response, and that can make us more defensive. So that when people are like, seems like, is everything okay? You seem like you're a little more snippy. And it can be great if that person in our life is actually a helpful person who we can get that feedback from and not feel like we have to be defensive about it, but can actually hear them and be like, you know what, you're right. So I really appreciate that too. Yeah, an increased need for sleep or putting off uncomfortable tasks. These are all excellent. I mean, it seems like all of you are quick to notice. You're all quick to notice sort of these early signs and know what to do to adjust to them. Okay, let me just keep clicking through. There was one other thing I was just going to mention right here, which is I think our brain likes to be like, I'm already so busy. How could I possibly have time to integrate a walk, right? So we might say, or journaling. Just as I was looking at this, I thought, there've been times in my life where I've been so stressed and overwhelmed and burnt out that if someone was like, hey, why don't you come take a walk for me? My initial gut reaction might be like, what? I don't have time for a walk. Didn't you hear me? I just said I was so busy. And so what I try to do in that moment is I think there was like a business person in here. I might like really warp a business theory, but it's for the sake of the better. So I do just sort of like a cost benefit analysis, right? And so, yeah, when our schedules are already super full, the idea of integrating a 20-minute walk might sound like I have no place to squeeze in that 20 minutes. But then if I can say, okay, this is going to cost me 20 minutes. But last night, as I was trying to write a paper, I was staring at my computer screen from 7 p.m. to midnight. So that was 5 hours. But throughout that 5 hours, I was falling asleep. I was getting restless. I was going for multiple snacks in the fridge. I was needing to space out and scroll Facebook for 15-minute chunks or something. And so then usually if I do that math, I go, okay, well, that wasted time from trying to spend 5 hours writing this paper definitely added up to way more than 20 minutes. So today I'm going to invest 20 minutes in taking a walk, clearing my mind. And then the hope can be that then I only have to spend from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. tonight working on homework because it's going to be way more focused time because I did this wellness activity. So you know what I mean? I think we all just have to kind of sit and do those little, have those hard conversations with ourselves to say that the initial gut response is to say, I don't have time or I can't do it. But to not only check our perfectionism, which is wanting to do it perfectly, and or kind of just doing a quick like checking of the facts, like, well, that's 20 minutes investment here, but it's going to pay off by giving me 2 extra hours of productivity or sleep or fun, right? I want to just do a quick exercise with us together because we all have to be here anyway. And so we might as well do a little physical stress relieving experience. So however you're sitting, wherever you are at home, just kind of find some symmetry in your body. So if you're like leaning, on your couch or your bed, maybe just uncross your legs or stretch your feet out. If you're in a chair, just feel the chair holding your hips evenly. If you have access to the floor, you might just put the soles of your feet on the floor, kind of feel your shoulders fall down from your ears a little bit. Feel your head stacked over your chest, stacked over your pelvis, right? So sort of just creating a nice, like sturdy vessel for air to flow in and out. And then you could do this one in class. I do this one sometimes between appointments here at the counseling center where, I get tense listening to people's stories because I'm listening with a lot of attention. So I find my shoulders rising up, or I find my body kind of leaning in toward the people that I'm listening to. And so just start with the toes. And how about, here's what I want to have you do real quick. Just pick a quick number in your mind from 0 to 10. So 0 being not stressed at all, 10 being like the most stress you've ever felt in your body. So just real quick on that little scale, pick a number that you think you're at right at this moment. Okay, and then you take a deep breath like I did, and start with your toes and just clench all 10 of your toes, squeeze them real tight, engage all the muscles in your toes. And then on an exhale, just release your toes, feel some of that tension come out. And then I'll do your whole foot. Squeeze your toes and your feet and your heels. Try to touch your toes to your heels. And then on an exhale, release that. And then try to squeeze the lower half of your legs, whatever that looks like for you. So from your kind of like your ankles up, see if you can engage that part of your leg. From your knees down, and then exhale and just release all those muscles. Let some extra tension go. Now engage the upper half of your legs. Really tighten those muscles. Engage. Squeeze. And then relax. And then move into your torso. So maybe just like fold in or clench kind of in your chest and stomach and back. Just kind of hug it all in. And then exhale, release, shake that out. And then let's do our arms. So maybe a really tight squeeze in with fists and fingers, and bend at your elbows. And then just exhale, kind of shake out your arms. And then you can even do your face, like a really tense squeeze of your face and your jaw and your eyes. And then release. Oh, I'm sorry, my phone's ringing. And then you can just kind of come back to this moment. So that's just even a really quick one. I wasn't looking at the clock for how long that lasted, but that's 2 minutes. Oh, and then just join back to the scale. So maybe what I might say is like, I was feeling a little tense and stressed today. I was at a 6. I spent 2 minutes doing that. I guess I would say I'm at a 5 now. Like, I think I released some tension in my shoulders. My hips feel a little less tense. So I do that scaling a lot just to remind my body that there's a reason I'm doing these things. So I may do that when I'm really thirsty and I realize it's been 8 hours since I've had some water. I do a quick, like, where am I 0 to 10? Oh my God, I'm at a 9. I feel really like spaced out. And then I'll like take a few minutes, drink a glass of water, and then kind of let my body regulate and do the scaling again, just to say like, see body, we feel a little better. We went from an 8 to a 7 just by drinking some water. Okay. I want to be mindful of time. This is another really common mindfulness and stress reducing strategy to integrate. Again, I try to think of things that we can even do like while we're in a super boring class or while we're at our job. This is something I'll do if I'm in a super like stressful meeting or it's a little, I'm feeling anxious in it or something, is the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So 5 things you can see, 4 things you can, oh, my little thing's in the way. Yeah, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste. I mean, you don't have to follow this exactly, right? But again, it just brings us into our body, creates that partnership of how we notice when things are escalating inside our own body. Deep breathing, I don't know, this can be sort of like even a trigger for me. Even before I came to a therapist, if I would go to a therapist and they would say, have you tried deep breathing? I'd be like, oh, yes, it's not fixing anything. So I think what I choose to say instead is thoughtful breathing that works for you, right? And so generally what can happen if we're super stressed, our breathing becomes really shallow. And, you know, it's our body's really tight and tense. It's up high in our chest. So I say just find a relationship with breath. I don't want to dictate or tell anyone else how they should breathe to calm their nervous system. But generally what it is find the time of day when your breath is the most natural and relaxed. And usually if we're good sleepers, it's right before we fall asleep, or it's in those few moments just as we're waking up, if we generally wake up as calm people, or it's when we're like watching that favorite show on the couch on TV. So find whatever that breath is. And then if we can integrate that at the times that we're feeling really stressed and overwhelmed. The other one is I tell people if they're into music or playing instruments or swimmers, right? Or runners, is find that rhythmic breath. So like if you're someone who's sang in a choir, you kind of know that like deep rhythmic breath you get into, or if you're a runner, that pattern when your breath starts to match your pace, or when you're swimming, right? So I think finding that breath pattern can be really helpful too. And then also having a visualization to go with breath. So to me, that's helpful. If someone just says breathe, but I don't really know what I'm looking for, then I can get hyper fixated on my breath. So for me, sometimes I'll do an exercise where I associate a breath in with a certain color and a breath out with a certain color. Okay, so we've kind of talked about all of these things that are in the category of stress, which then leads to burnout, trying to notice signs early. If we miss the early signs, how do we kind of help rein things back in? Where I come in as a counselor at the counseling center is, when do you know maybe this is outside the realm of being able to kind of re-regulate your body yourself, and when you might need to bring in outside help. No shame in that. My mission in life is to help us all know we could all benefit from counseling all the time. So this kind of is when symptoms have definitely past the 2-week threshold. So again, I wouldn't necessarily say this. If you get an assignment, you're super stressed about it and it's due in 2 weeks, not necessarily like that, but when the highs and lows of life have continued, and for maybe a month, you're like, I just, no matter what happens, when the test is over, I still feel this way. My family has come and gone from a visit, I still feel this way. And that's, again, more extreme sleeping difficulties. Appetite changes are starting to result in significant weight changes. Really struggling out to get out of bed, maybe for days at a time. You can't even concentrate on classes you used to be interested in, not showing up to work, like really people are starting to notice. And of course, at the most extreme, feeling like a desire not to be alive anymore because of how extreme the sensation has gotten. And so we would absolutely recommend you give the counseling center a call. I just think one of the great benefits that's come post-COVID is access to mental health resources online. So it's NAMI, the National Association on Mental Illness. They offer weekly free group opportunities to check in for mental health. So you can always search like NAMI free support groups. I should have put a link in here. I don't. Social support, just anything on campus. Doesn't even have to be mental health related, but maybe getting over to do a Tai Chi class at the gym, at the rec center. And then of course, therapy. And I also encourage people, again, our brain is in our body. So if our physical health is suffering, sometimes we need to just do a physical health checkup, right? And if we're predisposed to medical concerns, in our family, sometimes it can be a medical reason we're feeling the way we feel. So quickly to summarize, some levels of stress can be beneficial and are to be expected from this time of life. Everyone experiences some level of stress. It's when the symptoms start to get worse and when they're harder and harder to get rid of, that we need to pay closer attention. Sooner you can get ahead of them, of course, the easier it is to kind of rein it back in. And lots of ways to manage. So moving away from finding the perfect way to do it to just integrate little opportunities and not being afraid to ask for help. So calling our counseling center at any point. One thing people might not know is that our telephone number to the counseling center changes to an on-call therapist line overnight and on weekends. And so if something's coming up and you've not been able to schedule it with us, or you didn't think you needed to, or something really unexpected comes up, feel free to call the counseling center number, which is on the next slide. And you'll be able to talk to an on-call therapist at any time too. And so I have the information for the counseling center here, as well as the health clinic. This is going to seem out of order. There is one other thing I want to review for people. Here at the counseling center, we do offer traditional talk therapy, but one of the other services we offer is sort of a modified acupuncture. So if anyone knows what acupuncture is, it's Eastern medicine that uses teeny tiny needles to kind of align pathways, energy pathways in our body. And so the way it's done here at the counseling center is we have a super comfortable room with super comfortable chairs and lighting and spa music. And you don't have to talk to anyone about your problems. You could just come in for an AccuDetox appointment. The providers will put just a few needles in specific spots in your ear, and you just get 30 minutes to an hour to just sort of like let that meditative healing experience take place too. So there's also a non-talking option for mental health services here. I think that's all I have. Does anyone have any questions or thoughts or concerns? Or Ryan, do you have anything you'd like to share?
Sorry, I was trying to click the unmute button, but ended up clicking something else. No, but thank you so much for sharing. I found a lot of those tips very helpful. And it's good to know that you're never alone when you are feeling this way, that lots of people feel this way, and it is okay to get help. And our counseling center is very helpful for that.
And probably lots of PAC Center resources too. I just,
Yeah,
it doesn't
absolutely.
necessarily have to be a counselor, just a trusted advisor sometimes on campus to chat with.
Yeah, definitely.
And I can share this PowerPoint with you if you'd like to distribute it to the group, or just hang on to it too. Or I guess everyone gets this video too.
Yeah, that would be great. Love that.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys for coming. I appreciate you guys being here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
Good rest
you.
of your day.
Just gonna hang out, make sure it doesn't seem like anyone needs anything.